When I was 8 or 9, I saw something weird on Christmas Eve. This was many, many years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I still believed in Santa Claus then, as a good amount of children do, and I had the usual anxiety and excitement for Santa to leave Christmas presents by the tree. After I went to bed, I had some trouble going to sleep with holiday nerves and such. I had finally drifted off when I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps somewhere in my room. I automatically assumed it was Santa Claus, and I was scared to see him for fear he might leave or his magic would fail. I opened one eye just barely and saw this black figure standing over my bed, staring at me. It was tall, probably around 6 feet tall, and was completely dark. It looked almost blacker than black in a way. I couldn't see any eyes, a mouth, or a nose on it, but I could clearly see the outline of a head, arms, body, and legs. It looked like a bigger person, so thinking it was Santa just made sense. It stayed in one spot for 10, maybe 15 seconds, until it took a few steps closer. It leaned in a little more, still a few feet away from me, and then stayed there for 10 or 15 seconds more. Even though I couldn't see a face, I knew it was looking right at me. It's just that weird feeling you get when you know you're being watched or looked at. I closed my eyes again and waited for a few minutes. When I looked back, it was gone. I lived in a pretty old house at the time, so the doors and floorboards were squeaky and loud. I heard footsteps, but I'd never heard the door open. I never saw this figure again, though I've had some other spooky experiences in this house. I asked my mom if she heard Santa when he came into my room last night, and she looked confused for a second. Then she played along and just assumed I was lying. I know this wasn't a person, and I know this wasn't a dream. I also know that spirits and entities are often attracted to lots of excitement or energy, so Christmas would be a perfect time for a ghost to pass through. I recently moved back in with my dad. I'm 19 years old and lived by myself a few blocks from him in a small town. He moved across the country, and I decided at the last minute to come with, because I didn't want to be alone. Because of my last minute decision, my dad's house wasn't necessarily big enough, so he finished the basement and turned it into a gorgeous room for me. I've been told I have a very active imagination. In my old house, I often heard strange noises in the attic. My first thought was that there was someone living up there, rather than a more plausible squirrel or mice. I saw a video once of a family who had someone living upstairs and they didn't know. Could never get it out of my head. Because of my active imagination, anything I worry about isn't taken seriously. I'm an adult who's scared of the monsters in my closet. Well, tonight, I experienced something I cannot explain. I'm sitting on my bed around 2 a.m., playing with my hair and scrolling through Facebook. Then I heard what here sounds like something heavy slide across my carpet. The best way I can describe it is someone pushing a huge piece of furniture across it. I stopped. I looked around, analysed everything in my room and couldn't really see anything out of place. I started to wonder if maybe I've left the door open and an animal got in. I investigated, moved things around, and found no animal. So I went upstairs to calm myself down and grab a glass of water. Once I finally decided to go back downstairs, I opened my bedroom door and I watched my clean and folded clothes get picked up and pushed to the other side of the full tote they're in. I haven't finished unpacking yet and have all of my clothes filled to the brim in these plastic bins. I watched my clothes move along with the tote on their own. Almost as if someone stuck their hands under all the clothes on one side and threw them up to the other side. The tote also moved slightly. It tilted up due to the weight of all my clothes on one side and just fell back down. I called my younger sister as I ran upstairs and she laughed it off and brought me a pillow and blanket to the couch. I am paranoid, but also, I know what I saw. I'm terrified to tell my family because they constantly tease me for being immature. I can't watch horror movies. I can't watch or hear scary stories. I can't even watch shows like Supernatural without convincing myself everything in it could be real. What if it is? I should be worried. It's such a dilemma when I'm constantly scared and paranoid. These crazy things can happen to me, and when I see something genuinely scary, I feel like the boy who cried wolf. I remember as a little girl always being in tune with the paranormal. Seeing my grandfather and his mom, who I never met, was a common occurrence as a child as they died in the family home. As of today, the home is 100 years old. My great grandfather built it with money he earned from owning a gambling den and pool hall. It was a humble home. In that time, 4 people died in that home from old age and sickness, alongside countless pets. However, this is the horrible aura of seething hatred that resides in the home. Ever since I was young, the house instilled a sense of grave fear, and I could always feel a horrible presence. Many house guests over the years would also complain about feeling something evil nearby. My mom, brother, and myself would see a haunting black shadow figure with piercing red eyes. However, it wasn't truly human in appearance. It had a long, featureless face, long, gnarly fingers, and a tall body that would contort. You could always feel him watching you, even when he did not manifest. He would call your name in the day and at night, distinct male voice, hence why I call it a he. When he would manifest, you would see him either on the ground, crouching and cocking his head at you, his hands pry open doors, and yes, they would open enough for him to peer at you with those eyes, and he'd cling to the walls like Spider-Man and stare at you while slowly making his way towards you. He would back away and look confused if you spoke to him or asked for help. I believe he caused physical harm to myself and others. My dad and my ex-husband would feel someone sitting on them and strangling them at night. Once, I woke up with scratches on my face after seeing him in my bed. He traumatized me for years since I always had insomnia. My mom for years was convinced someone sent a demon on her, but it never followed her or us when we moved. He can't leave the house. I live next door now in another home my family built. You can feel and occasionally see him stare at you from the windows when you're outside the home, especially in the evenings around 3 a.m. You don't feel his presence and the sense of dread until you enter the threshold. My husband feels it every time he goes to visit and has seen the being the one time he slept over almost 6 years ago. We were talking about him last night and my husband mentioned in detail that I used to see and hear his behaviour. He, of course, had to insult the creature when he was creeping towards us by calling him an ugly bastard, but he's seen worse. That apparently confused him and left him alone after that. Over the decades, the house has been blessed and curanderos have been called to help, but he remains, watching, instilling fear, and calling you. We don't know what he is or how to get rid of it. I feel like something ties him to our him. My gut tells me that he was murdered long ago and tries to instill the same fear he felt when dying. Any help or advice? My brothers live there now. I want to be able to visit them with my daughter after she's born and not feel this hatred. First of all, this took place around midnight 2 years ago. I was living in a small town surrounded by forests in a block of flats. Whole neighborhood was block of flats. When I was playing on my console with my friends, my parents were going to sleep, so I told them I need to be quieter than usual. They got tired and went to sleep. When I was playing alone, I got really thirsty, so I went to the kitchen to get myself some water. Everything was good, like every night. Everything is quiet, no people playing loud music. I could say that it was the perfect time to relax, but I noticed something weird. It was a lot quieter than every other night. It was like, okay, that's cool. I'll finally get some rest. I was horribly wrong. I had a window open to let in some fresh air in my room, and I think that it was a mistake to open the window that night. I was on my phone when I heard a cat, I think, screaming. When this happened, it started to get weirder every minute. I knew something was off because after that, the wind stopped. Next thing that happened was that weird feeling that is with you every time when you feel like something will happen. Then, I heard this growl. I can tell it wasn't any animal because it didn't sound like an animal. When I heard that, I was really scared. When I calmed down, I went to sleep. In the morning, I decided to check out if there were any clues that will help identify that creature, but sadly there was nothing. Today, I think this growl came from the basement, which is haunted. Why haunted? The lights in the basement were new at that moment, and they were literally going off and on. Next thing is weird noises, even in daytime. Third thing is that there is something in that basement. Me and my friends decided to go there and check it out, and the first thing that happened was a loud bang on the doors next to us. That door leads to a room where you can let your clothes dry, but when I opened that door, there was nothing. So, it all started at a moment when I was living in my own apartment. Life was okay though. I felt helpless sometimes. At some point, I started to have nightmares. The first one was with something looking like a decaying zombie who would run to me while screaming. After this, I then stayed 8 hours in my apartment, still in the dream, in darkness, where I would try to find things to light up the place. Every time it would get too dark, the screaming thing would come to me again, and I could only push it back by screaming myself. In the middle of the thing, I found a light who worked, for 5 seconds before going off. Other lights didn't work. At this period of my life, I had this horrible dream that was extremely realistic. Problem is, it didn't stop there. I had other dreams similar, like being in my kitchen and the light didn't work, while some shadow figure started to cover the window. If this was only bad dreams, honestly, I'll be okay with it. The thing is that during that time, which lasted about a month or two, all lights went off in real life. I had 4 lights in my apartment that stopped working. I had the headlights of my car stop working too. A friend gave me a desk lamp that exploded while at 30 centimeters from my face. Luckily, it didn't hit me. I had some electrician friends to whom I've shown the light bulb, and they were puzzled. They never saw a lamp break this way. Now, it's okay. It lasted a bit of time. About 6 to 7 lights went off. I had nightmares, but it stopped. Since then, I still get from time to time similar nightmares. In one, I see a friend and try to talk to him, but the only sound that comes out is like a roar. In all of them, lights don't work. In the last one I had some days ago, I saw another friend. I remember saying that it wasn't really my friend, and he started laughing in a very frightening way. The big problem I have is that I fear it starts again. After this last dream, one light started to flicker. I know somehow that it's all about an issue I have that I should resolve, but I don't really know what to do. I made this post hoping someone will eventually have some hindsight on this. Around mid-August 2021, my sister was walking her friend home, and it was about 9 p.m, and he lives down the same road as us. Mentioning we do live out in the boonies in southwest Montana. And as soon as they left the house, the TVs lost signal. But it was a clear night. You could see all the stars. She then comes running back inside, and this is what she said happened. She kept hearing someone yelling coming from the north side of the end of our road. She said she thought someone was arguing, and it was short bursts of a male yell. Then, when they walked down the road a little further, she heard the man yelling in the woods next to them. They stopped and just listened until it did it again, and that's when they ran inside. About 10 or 15 minutes after they came in, the TV's back on. Nothing happened for about a week after that, until one day I got home from a friend's house, probably around 1 to 4 p.m. And I actually heard the yelling my sister was talking about. It was exactly how she described it, but it was coming from our backyard, which is also a wooded area. I was spooked, so I didn't go check it out, but this is where everything started to kick off. My sister never had any more experiences after this, but that night, I heard the yelling, the tapping started. And it's not knocks or taps in 3, it's like 1, 2, 1, 2. With about 1 second between the first 2, then the second 2 are right after each other. The first time I heard it, I was laying in bed and it was tapping on my window around 3 p.m. So it was still daylight then, on the wall right by my bed where my head lays. My window is about 6 feet off the ground, and the wall, my bed, is about 8 to 10 feet off the ground. After it happened, I looked out my window and I didn't see anything. I asked my dad if he had tapped on my window, and he said he didn't and my sister isn't home. This same pattern of tapping almost every day since this happened, or at least 4 to 5 times a week. The end of October, I was looking for something in my car and was walking back up the house. And it was raining and I had my hood up. And I heard someone yell my name very angrily. It sounded very close. It sounded just like my mom, but she was at work at the time. I ran inside and asked my dad if he called me. He said no, and we kind of patrolled the area and didn't see anything. At this point, I legitimately thought I was going crazy. Nobody I talked to believed me or told me not to worry about it, until my boyfriend and I were just sitting in his truck at the end of my road, because there's no houses down there. It's quiet, and that's our favourite thing to do, just sit in his truck. We stayed out late. It was probably 4 a.m. My landlord owns a ranch and it extends to where my road ends, and we were petting the ponies, and he said, "I think we should go back to the truck. I feel like there's something over there." And right as he finished saying that, all the ponies ran away from the spot he was talking about. So we got to the truck, sat and talked for a while, and the tapping started happening again to me. It sounded like it was on the truck, but he said he heard it in the distance, but it was very soft. It went continuously for about 3 minutes, which is the longest it happened. It stopped for 20 more minutes, then started again. We ended up leaving the area 45 minutes later, and his truck was making weird-ass noises, like it wasn't wanting to keep moving. He said it's never done it in the past, but it is a 2010. A couple of days ago, my boyfriend introduces me to one of his friends who claims to be a psychic medium, and my boyfriend didn't tell him my story or anything, but as soon as we were walking into his house, he said he felt a negative presence in the room. And when I was in the bathroom, he told my boyfriend he saw it, but didn't want to explain what he saw. But I do remember him carrying his Bible around. For a little more context, I've lived here for 14 years, and this is the only time something like this has happened. The only thing that changed before all of this happened is I had to foster a dog and gave him away to a new home. We only have one neighbour that is close to our house, and they just moved in. No one in my family has met them yet. Besides my sister, no one else in the house has experienced anything, and my sister hasn't experienced anything after the first time it happened. Around 2011, my family was on vacation in the Los Angeles area. My mother is a fan of strange museums, so she would practically drag us kids along to these weird places. She decided we should go to the Queen Mary Museum, as it had a reputation for being a haunted tourist trap. I was young and very much afraid of that sort of stuff, But I didn't want to look like a wimp in front of my siblings, so I didn't object to going. Plus, I had just gotten a new iPod Touch and wanted to take photos with it. The ship itself was ancient and sort of run down, but the interior was pretty nice and it had that old school classy charm. We started the ghost tour and ventured into the inner rooms of the ship. The tour had rooms where we would stop and watch these special effects of ghosts, and of course, that freaked me out, so I clung to the back of the group with my older brother, who was kind of a prankster, but is our protector. I covered my eyes for most of the rest of the tour, as the fake ghosts and loud noises completely terrified me. My older brother would do his typical teasing of tapping me on the shoulder and moving away when I turned my head. He did this a few times until I turned around and told him to quit it. Shockingly, it actually worked and he stopped attacking me, which was out of character for him, as normally he would just mess with me more. The tour ended and we went around the rest of the ship taking photos and enjoying our time there. It wasn't until we got off the ship that my brother pulled me aside with a horrified look and told me that when I told him to stop messing with me, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He said he turned around and nobody was there. I believed him, as we were in the back of the tour with nobody behind us. Looking back, I think he may have been messing with me again, but it's hard to get a straight answer from him. My mum used to tell me that I refused to sleep in my room because I kept telling her that there was a hanged man in the closet. I don't remember much of it since I was a child. I would throw tantrums because I wouldn't sleep in my room, so she made me sleep in the living room. She also told me that she would hear my bed moving during the night, and when she woke up to see what was happening, she saw my bed in the other side of the room with my clothes all over the floor. We moved out and this thing kept following me wherever I went. When I was 9, I was still living in the same city as when I was 4. I woke up during the night and saw a hanged man approaching me. I was in the same room as my sister and we slept in a bunk bed, since it would make more room for other furniture. I saw what I think was a Roman soldier decaying and approaching me. I slept in the bed that was on the top, and my sister slept in the bottom bed. One night, there was a storm and we decided to keep the windows closed to avoid having to deal with water the next day. The door was closed because my mom wanted to keep an eye on us, since we didn't always listen to her as kids. Then, the door was violently shut. I started laughing because that's what I do when I'm nervous, and my sister was crying because she got scared. At the time, my mom was in the living room with my stepfather. They asked us if we did this. We said no. We were talking asleep, and we heard the door shutting like someone closed it out of anger. This was in 2013. I stopped seeing the soldier and moved out to my dad since my dad was neglecting us and abused drugs in our care. I'm currently 18 years old, and I've seen the soldier hanged near my boyfriend's TV. It was dark, but I could still see the same Roman soldier. My boyfriend told me a couple of days ago that he felt like the bed was moving when we were asleep. The thing hasn't done anything other than scare the living hell out of me. This thing has followed me since I was 4 years old. I've had other similar things happen to me, but without seeing the Roman soldier. I have a dog, and a couple days ago, he wouldn't come into the room. I even offered to let him go to bed, since he wasn't always allowed to do so. He left with his ears flattened and growled at something that was behind me. I grabbed my cat who was sleeping and said, "Hell no, I'm not doing this shit," and closed my bedroom door and went to the living room and waited for my boyfriend to arrive from work. I asked him if he could go check the room, and he went and didn't find anything. My dog went into the room and acted like everything was good now. This happened maybe 2 years ago, while riding quads with my boyfriend. It wasn't too late at night, maybe around 10 p.m. We were camping at our campground, where we have a small trailer surrounded by other camps. In the summer, it's full of kids running around and adults on golf carts. But it was late December, and we're one of the few people who go up in the winter, since it gets pretty cold and they shut the water off. The woods are a decent bit away from the actual campground. It gets pretty quiet out there, and something about the snow just makes everything quieter. I've always felt slightly uncomfortable in the woods at night. My boyfriend told me I was just a paranoid person, and I chalked it up to me reading too much Creepypasta as a kid. I always felt somewhat safer since we were on a quad, and we can go pretty fast if needed. So there we are, in the middle of the night, enjoying a cold ride, drifting in the snow, when all of a sudden we come to a stop. That's when I got an eerie feeling. I asked him why we stopped, and it was something along the lines of his glove or something on the quad came off. He turned the quad off and bent over, messing with something. I start looking behind me and around me because I'm just someone who's super aware of their surroundings. I look to my left and I see a brown, skinny tree that always freaks me out because I mistake it as something else. But then I look to the right of the scary tree and see something even taller and pale looking. I immediately avert my attention from it, being totally freaked out. I find the courage to look back and it seems closer. At this time, I didn't have my glasses on and was just saying it's another tree that looks like a person and I'm fine. Before I could say anything to my boyfriend, he had finished whatever he was doing and we took off. I buried my face in the back of his jacket, too afraid to see anything else. Still having that feeling of being watched over me, I asked if we could go back to camp and he agreed, since it was so cold. I decided not to say anything to him since he'd want to go back and investigate, or straight up not believe me and write me off as paranoid again. And I didn't want to go back there at all. I figured the following day we would go back into the woods during daytime, and I would see that there was another tree that I never noticed before. But when we went back though, and there was nothing next to the brown tree, that's when my stomach dropped. That's also when I told him I saw something last night. He told me I should have told him, which he was right. I should have said something, but I was just too scared and just kept it to myself. We still go up there occasionally, not as much due to our jobs now, but I've never experienced anything else after that. A little backstory about the spare room. When I first bought my home last year, there was a family of around 13 people living in it, 6 of which were adults, 3 small bedrooms and 1 sketchy annex in the garage. A year later, and the neighbourhood is still telling me stories about how awful these people were as neighbours. The annex room was initially shoddy framing and drywall work, presumably installed by that family. The walls were painted a weird green colour, and the rug was a wrinkly stained mess. It became apparent that someone had been peeing in all 4 corners of the room. I figured it might just be pets, but there was a mirror that had "Please help me" written on it in makeup, and the room locked from outside. The day we got our keys, I got called to respond to the Seattle riots with my National Guard unit and was gone for about a month. During that time, my wife and the in-laws began renovating the home to make it livable. I felt guilty being unable to help. My wife got together with my mom to convert that scary extra room into a man cave / jam room with all my music equipment and memorabilia. It came out really nice, but I haven't found much time to use it in the past year. A couple of months ago, I built a gaming PC and decided to set it up in that room. Now that I've been going in there almost daily, things have started to feel a little strange around the house. I get the sensation someone is standing directly behind me, once or twice a day in the room. Our TV set on fire in the living room a few weeks ago. Our water main burst last weekend, causing us to dig our yard up over the course of 3 days. And my garage light keeps turning on and off. I can hear the light switch. This morning I got out of the shower to find that my wife had already left for work. I'm coming down the hall and I hear it clearly say, "Hey babe?" from the spare room at the side of the house. I replied, "You're still here?" To which I got silence. I looked out the front window and sure enough, her truck was gone. That's when I heard it again. "Babe, come here." I grabbed my things and noped to work, lol. Anyway, when I was pulling out of the driveway, I could hear what sounded like a girl screaming from outside, followed by a bang. I stopped before backing into the street thinking, was that my phone? I waited for a second before continuing on my way, thinking it might be the school across the street. I got about 50 feet down the road before I heard it again. This time it was faint, but sounded like it was coming from in the car. I paused at the stop sign and rolled down the windows to see if it would happen again, as it had sounded identical to the first one. Nothing. I roll up my windows and continue on my way to find that it happened several more times, almost like a recording. Same scream and bang over and over for another mile or so. Anyway, I'm weirded out for the day. Might sage later and bang some pans together, I don't know. A few weeks ago, I couldn't sleep, so at about 4 a.m, I went to the studio I take a class in for college to get some work done. While there was one other person there named Peter. I don't feel bad using his real name because as far as I can tell, he doesn't exist. I said hi, we chatted while I worked. I watched the sunrise. He said he had to get back to work on the other side of the building, separate studio, but I walked past it on my way in, and I said okay and waved. He took a few steps away and said, "Weird, isn't it?" I think he wasn't facing me. And since I'm bad at hearing, I assumed I misheard him and laughed it off. I swear, 20 minutes after the sun was all but fully in the sky, which I know because the section outside the building is very empty, but without me realizing it was rising. Again. The sky had gone back to dark, and the sun was cresting again. I went down and told Peter, and he found it funny. I've looked for him on my way in every day since then, since I saw where he sat. Someone else sits there, and I don't know them well enough to ask.